Step 3. Pull the ejector seat handle.
Right. Here it goes. Pull.
Like a zombie from the grave, the channel is resurrected once again. I'm just wanting like a hammer horror, bleh, I can't speak, hammer horror, like flashing lightning and big bold logo, the channel that would not die. Uh, this is a very impulsive, talky video where I talk. I need said unscripted, as if I've ever written a video script in my life. This is a very exciting breaking news video in which imminent smashing happening right now news, where I've got to tell you an incredibly important revolutionary news that I'm playing a video game from 2 or 3 years ago for the first time, and it's very exciting. I am playing the new Hitman games, which are confusingly called Hitman and Hitman 2, even though there were like 10 years previously 2 games with those same names pretty much. I hate modern reboot naming trends like Devil May Cry 2013, which is a whole controversy let's not get into because I can already sense a tangent coming on. But Hitman, right, I gotta tell you, it's really good. New Hitman games. Oh, Sunny Jim, it's one of those game series I kind of forget that I was obsessed with for a long time, like Splinter Cell. Maybe it's just one of those franchises that went dormant for ages, so I forgot that I liked it. But when was the last good Splinter Cell game? I didn't play the newer ones. No, tangent control, no tangents allowed. Hitman is a game series from like 2002 or something, I think it started. I've played most of them. The only one I haven't really played much of is Absolution, which is kind of the black sheep of the franchise. Actually, I haven't really played the first one either because it's extremely clunky. The nice thing about the Hitman games is, generally speaking, they get more accessible as the series goes on without getting, like, I hate the phrase dumbed down, but that's the thing, They get easier to get into, the newer ones, but they're still very challenging if you want them to be, which we will get into, no doubt. This could be 30 minutes, it could be 30 hours, depends how long I need to ramble. But it's a series of stealth games where you're Agent 47, the world's most inexplicably talented stealth man, and his main gimmick is that he's an assassin, and his main gimmick is that he changes clothes, he steals your clothes. That sounds so bizarre to say out of context, but no, he will like knock you out and then take your clothes as a disguise so that he can get into the secret area and kill his target. And it's a very sort of, the basic structure is it's very mission based. It's like, in this mission you must kill the corrupt movie star. There we go. I think that's also a Wolfenstein story, is killing like a corrupt Hollywood star. Everything ties back to Wolfenstein on this channel. I don't know why that is. And what's so great about Hitman is, especially, I'm going to use this phrase a lot, especially the newer games, you start a level and it's like a big sort of, I hate to use the word sandbox, but the levels are big and there's no obvious like one direction to go, so you kind of just wander off. You'll know who your target is. You're killing Mr. Bad Hollywood Man or whoever, and it'll say, oh, he's known to be doing a production of The Great Escape today or something. I don't know, I'm making it up. I don't know why I'm making it up when there's so many real levels I could use. Okay, scrap the Hollywood Man idea. Yeah, there's a level in Blood Money, Hitman Blood Money, where it's like a theatre and they're practicing their like opera or whatever. And there's a scene where the actor is being like shot at. So they keep doing that scene over and over again. And a lot of the appeal of the Hitman games is exploring the level, getting to know the routines of all the major characters, and then figuring out the most efficient and stealthy route to kill your target and get out without anyone ideally knowing about it. You can just set it easy mode, unlock the dual silenced pistols, and just go shoot everyone if you want. And if you want to do that, that's entirely valid, but it's a bit like playing a Metal Gear game and then not trying to do the stealth. It's kind of like, why are you here? Because this is what the game is good at. And other than just messing around for 5 minutes, I've never played Hitman and thought, I would like to beat the game without using stealth. It's like playing Grand Theft Auto without ever driving a car, you know? There are other things to do, but car driving is a fairly crucial aspect of it. It's called Grand Theft Auto. Autos are involved. What was the first Hitman game I really played? I think it was Contracts, and what's great about the Hitman games is once you've played one of them, you kind of know what to expect, but that doesn't, which seems weird. It's something reassuringly familiar. I love how every mission is its own, that structure of the mission is kind of its own self-contained story where there's only a bit of an overlapping story. So you could theoretically play the missions out of order if the game lets you, but obviously they do tend to get harder near the end. Every mission has an incredible amount of detail put into it. Like, you can overhear conversations. Here's that phrase again. Especially the newer games are very good at this. It's very good at, like, you'll be wandering around and you'll hear a lot of conversations going on, and your ears will kind of prick up when someone mentions your target's name, and they'll say, oh yes, the opera man at the theatre, he really enjoys apples. So you're like, well, maybe if I go to the kitchen, I could find some apples, and I've got this poison syringe, so I could... It's literally that sort of thing, you know, and important intel will cause a note to appear in the new games that says, he enjoys apples, you know, just as a reminder. The game is very good, these new Hitman games. It's so awkward that they don't have like a proper subtitle, because all the other ones do, and now it's so confusing. The new Hitman games are very good at, you have a lot of options for help. You know, there's difficulty modes, like you'd expect, but there's also, like, the game can give you considerably more hints if you want. It can kind of guide you into doing a certain strategy. But for me, at least as someone who's played the games before, it's much more fun to have to explore at my own pace. So, like, you can look at the map and see where your targets are at all times, generally. But getting to them without someone realizing that you're a murderer and also getting away with the murder is generally, you know, and that's some of the most tense parts, is when your target is right over there, and if you could just get them alone for 10 seconds, you could shoot them, but you're surrounded by guys. The very first level in the new Hitman trilogy, I guess it's called a trilogy, the third one hasn't actually come out yet, but it is coming this year or next year, soon anyway. The very first level is set in Paris, and it's at a big fashion show where there's loads of people. There's huge crowds through most of the level, and it's not only does that act as like cover, you can blend in. There's a whole mechanic where you can blend into crowds and like foliage and stuff to avoid detection. But it also means, so the good side is that you can use it as cover, but the bad side is anywhere that the crowd is, it's incredibly hard to get away with doing any kind of like obviously suspicious action. So half of the challenge of these games is just finding a way to get your target in a room by themselves, or at least with only a couple of other people. You can poison them, you can stab them with whatever like random objects you've got lying around, you could throw things at them. Some of the most fun moments for me is when I've just been forced to use a random object nearby as the killing weapon. I'm like, oh god, this is my one chance, and I'm out of bullets. I'll throw this statue at them. You know, it's just those moments of impulse are very funny to me. They create those stories like, oh, there was this one time I had him in the room and I didn't have any ammo, so I had to throw the statue at him. Oh no. And the game, what I've been doing traditionally with the Hitman level is I do what I call the sloppy run, which sounds like some sort of diarrhea euphemism. I'm sorry, the sloppy run. I do the sloppy run where I just try to get through the level and beat kill the targets and beat the mission. Sometimes there are other objectives, like there's one mission in Blood Money where you have to rescue someone, which is actually one of the more annoying missions from my experience because the AI isn't very good when it comes to like not killing things. But generally, you just go in, kill your targets, get out. Sometimes there'll be specific criteria. But when I do the sloppy run, I just try to beat the mission, and it doesn't have to be elegant. I just want to get to know the general layout of the mission, and then I can always come back and do a better run. I'm generally happy with a mission if I've got in and got out without leaving any witnesses. But the creme de la creme, the ultimate theoretical goal, at least in general, for a Hitman game is to do the silent assassin run, is what it's called. Silent assassin means you do a mission without your cover being blown or having to kill anyone other than your targets. So you can kill any random passers-by you want and, steal their clothes, but generally the game encourages you to just knock them out. And there are some opportunities where you can get clothes without actually having to attack anyone, but that's much rarer. There tends to only be one or two sets of clothes lying around. As you would expect, people don't generally leave their clothes lying around unless it's in a locker room or something. I found, funnily enough, that toilets are very useful in Hitman games. You can actually sounds so strange, because that's obviously a small room where you can just bop someone on the head, shove them in the toilet stall, and then it's usually reasonably safe that no one's going to find them there. If you poison the target, by the way, there is now 3 kinds of poison you can use. You can use lethal poison, which I think explains itself in the name. There's sedatives, which knock them out, and if you don't want to kill someone, that's obviously useful. But if they just collapse in the middle of the room, people will notice and wake them up generally. And there's also, I forget the word, it's called emeretic, whatever it's called. It means someone who eats something that's emeretic will immediately want to chuck their guts up. So that's when they run to the toilet and you can bash them around the head with your statue, which you've got there, I found the emeretic poisons are actually some of the most useful, because the lethal one, obviously, you can kill them just straight away, but there's a room full of witnesses and it'll set the alert off, whereas the emeretic, you'll often be able to get them in the toilet. And by the way, you can drown them in the toilets, in the actual toilet bowl, which is probably one of the most horrible ways to die imaginable. Is, oh no, oh, I've really got a puke, I better run into the loo and do my puking, as you do, and while you're mid-puke, someone grabs you by the scruff of your neck and pushes your head into your puke water in the toilet until you drown. I'm like, that's got to be one of the worst. I'm sure someone dies from like drowning in pig guts, one of the Saw movies. Why I watched 3 or 4 of those before giving up, I don't really know. I like the first Saw. This is a tangent, but I like the first Saw. The second one was quite terrible. The third one was a bit better, but increasingly silly. I have weird opinions on horror movies, sue me. Yeah, it's just I think these new Hitman games have done an incredible job of, like, I always say that Mario, like something like Mario Odyssey, is almost the perfect game just in terms of, like, you can pick up Mario Odyssey and start playing and have a good time, and it's fairly easy to beat. I think only like some of the later missions are a bit harder. So Mario Odyssey isn't a super hard game, so it's easy to get into. It's got a low skill floor, but a high skill ceiling, because if you want to 100% that game and do all the bonus secret levels and stuff, that takes way longer and is way harder. And Hitman, despite being a completely different, unrecognizable kind of game, has a kind of similar philosophy these days. The old games of Hitman were way clunkier and kind of notorious for, like, horrifically punishing mistakes and having very unreliable AI. Like, a guy would just be like, "Hey, you intruder," even little things now, like how you can hide in crowds, and if you walk into a room where you're not supposed to be, the radar will flash up like trespassing, and like little yellow exclamation marks will start coming up like, what are you doing? But you've got a couple of seconds to walk out, you know? So it's not like, literally in the old games, you'd walk into a room and have zero point 0.5 femtoseconds before someone went, it's an intruder, and starts shooting at you. It does always crack me up a little bit in the old Hitman games how, you know, that guy's acting strangely. He must be a murderer. You know, like you're an essentially random person in an innocent seeming place, but because you just look a bit strange, they assume you're here to kill someone. Which, to be fair, is true, but they didn't have enough evidence to make that assumption. Yeah, it's superb. I'll tell you a funny story actually. So I'm playing Hitman 2 on the old PS4 there. It's a funny thing. The first Hitman game had a really strange business model, and there's a bit of it left over. But they kind of released it episodically, and then wondered why no one bought it after the first couple of months. It's because you cut up your game really arbitrarily and didn't market it very well. But I'm playing Hitman 2, and I was like, this is fun. I would like to play Hitman 1, and I'm already so confused by these names. These are the new games, the new trilogy of games. I'd like to play the first of these, the new trilogy as well. And I've got a great thing that I discovered here in the UK called Boomerang. One of the only good things happening in the UK, by the way, these days, is this company I found called Boomerang Rentals, where you pay so much a month or so much a year, and they've got like 13 different like tiers. This is not an advert, by the way, although if they want to pay me, bloody hell, that'd be amazing, could suit me. Free rentals. You pay how much a year or how much a month, and the package I've got gives me what they call unlimited rentals, which means they'll send, at any time I'll have a game that I'm renting, but I can keep it for as long as I want, which is always one of the worst things about Blockbuster, is like, am I done with this game? Is it worth renewing? You know, because if I pay the $5 or whatever it was to rent it from Blockbuster for another week, back when Blockbuster existed, you know, it's kind of like, is it worth a $5 to me to keep playing this game? Whereas with Boomerang, at least the way I've got it set up, it's much more like, I'm not done with this game, so I might play it for another week or two. Sometimes I've kept a game for a month just because I'm enjoying it that much for that long, and then I'll get to the end. When I rented Star Wars Fallen Order, I actually played that through twice in succession because I liked it so much. I really love Boomerang, it's great. This is already a tangent, but it is a relevant tangent. I was playing Hitman 2 on the PS4, and I said I would like to play Hitman 1, so I rented Hitman 1 from Boomerang and installed it. Now, what I forgot and didn't expect is that there's some weird symbiotic relationship between Hitman 1 and 2. I'm literally making like finger waggling with my hands gestures as if you're going to see that. There's some weird symbiotic relationship between Hitman 1 and 2, which seems to be a bit of an acknowledgement that they fucked up the business model for the first game, so this is a bit of an apology. If you've got Hitman 1 and 2 installed, you can then claim for free what's known as the Legacy Pack, which is all of the levels, at least the base ones, from the first game, but you can then play them in the second game with all of the little gameplay improvements of the second game. And I was like, oh, neat. I didn't even expect that, and that was cool. And I thought, wait a second. So, you know, even though it's completely redundant already, because I'm already renting the game, so I'm already saving tons of money compared to buying it. So even though I rented the game, I realised I can now just take the Hitman 1 disc out, play Hitman 2, and I have all the Hitman 1 levels that are playable through Hitman 2, and as long as it's still installed on the PS4, that will continue to work. So for the past day, the disc has just been sat in my drawer because it isn't actually necessary beyond just... It's really, you know, it's you know, they didn't have to do that. It's not the most generous thing in the world, but they didn't have to do that. If you have Hitman 2 on your Xbox or whatever, see if you can find a friend who's got the first game, so you can just borrow it for like a day and then give it back to him. And now you've also got Hitman 1 on your Hitman 2 game install. It takes up like 90 gig or some huge amount of space, but free content, can't complain. So the funny thing is now, I've only had this Hitman 1 disc for a day, but on Monday I can just send it back and rent a different game instead. Result. I didn't mean to do this, and it's completely pointless. This is just showing how privileged I am. I don't even... it's like the dragons in Dark Souls, for some reason, have scales that make them immortal, but also a magic crystal that makes them immortal. Like, why you double immortal? What is the point? Why do you need this? It's exactly like that. Exactly like what that nonsense thing I said. I'm running out of steam a bit. Let's see if I can speed this up for the last 10 minutes or something. But yeah, I just really... Hitman's just so much fun, and I think they've done a better job this time round of making it more accessible to people. I've seen... I said about this on the internet, like, oh, I'm really enjoying these new Hitman games. I think they're much more accessible now as well. And I've had 2 or 3 different people come back to me on Reddit or somewhere to say, yes, these are the first Hitman games I've ever played, and I love them so much. I'm thinking of going back and playing the old ones. And I would say, actually, this is a good topic for Hitman. Hitman is a funny series to kind of go back and play the older games for, because they get progressively clunkier, which makes sense to an extent, but it's kind of funny how... It's not that the old games like Blood Money and Contracts aren't worth playing, it's just kind of harder to recommend now that the new games exist. 5 years ago I'd have said, yeah, Blood Money. Blood Money is one of my favourite stealth games. Can be a bit tricky to get into, but I totally recommend it if you like stealth games. Now I'm like, I recommend it if you like the newer and better Hitmans? I don't know. It's confusing. English is a silly language. Let's do a quick rundown. I think the first Hitman was called Agent 47. I don't know much about that one. It was only on PC and I've hardly ever played it, and it's really hard. And I got bored pretty quickly because I was sat there like, this one's really hard and confusing. I could be playing Blood Money right now. So I just played Blood Money instead, probably. Hitman 2, Silent Assassin. You can see how all these names are confusing, especially because the term Silent Assassin is a common term used within the Hitman games. Hitman 1, Hitman 2, Silent Assassin. That's when the games started to get good, if you ask me. It was on PS2 and stuff as well, rather than just being on the PC. It was still very clunky in a lot of ways, though. That was the time... it was the sort of game where you had 2 different crouch modes. There was like a speed crouch and a really slow crouch that was silent. So it took a long time to get used to that. You could kind of speed crouch a little bit, and then you have to go really slow to sneak up to someone. Sneaking up on someone was such a laborious process in old video games, I swear. If you go back and play the first Splinter Cell, it's just so much worse. I loved Splinter Cell 1 back in the day, but after playing Chaos Theory for years, it's so hard to go back to the first one, even though they're so similar on the surface. So Hitman 2 is a hard one to recommend, especially because the very next game, Hitman Contracts, was considerably better. Hitman 2, by the way, there was also a thing where... what was I going to say? Oh yeah, you would get instantly in trouble very quickly in Hitman 2 if you sprinted for any length of time, which really just added to the incredible amount of time you'd spend replaying levels sometimes. You could spend a solid 2 minutes just leisurely strolling to your next objective, you know. The newer games are much more lenient with that. Basically, in the new games, if you're under suspicion, sprinting will attract attention, but generally you can just run around the levels much more, sort of. I think they balance that by making Agent 47's sprint isn't much more of a fast strut than an actual sprint, so I think that's how they balanced it. Hitman 3, which is just called Hitman Contracts, really. I don't know why they dropped the numbers after 2. Hitman Contracts is a bit of a weird one because it kind of remakes some of the first game's levels, but it's also mostly a new game as well. So it's a bit of an oddity, but it was when I first really got into the series. It has a lot of the same clunk, but it's also just got some really good levels. There's one set in Siberia, I think, where you have to like stop this guy using like some decommissioned Soviet nuclear sub. I like how the guy will spot you as being suspicious if you kind of go into a meeting and he says, "Let's have some vodka," and you say, "None for me, thanks," and that's how he will catch you if you don't kill him quickly enough. Is that he's like, "Why would my business associate not want vodka?" Anyway, there's also a level in Contracts, and this is one of the strangest things actually to remember. There's a level where you have to kill, I think he's called the Meat King, who is a unbelievably overweight, like cartoonishly obese man who just seems to be bedbound, and he's Scottish because of course he is. I'm not sure what that says about. I'm not sure what they're trying to say by that. But he's this hugely overweight Scottish man who runs a meat factory, so that's why he's called the Meat King. So you have to kill him, and one of the ways you can do this is by sneaking poison into one of his turkeys. He demands an entire turkey for dinner, like every 5 minutes. You can poison the turkey, or you can hide a gun in the turkey so that when you go up to give it to him, you can just shoot him in the face. Contracts is where the series really got good, I think, but it still is quite clunky. Now, Blood Money, which is the 4th game, widely regarded as the fan favourite, at least until the new Hitman games came out. I think time will tell whether these new ones are more beloved, but Blood Money really expanded like your moveset. You could even little things, and this is something the new games took out actually. In Blood Money, if you've got like a weapon out, if you've got something that's obviously a weapon, like a knife, and then someone walks into the room, 47 will like dynamically and automatically put the weapon behind his back, which is just such a small touch, but it's such a great way to be like, oh no, quick, don't let them see the weapon, you know, and he'll like dynamically move it from side to side. So it'll just create these situations where you're like awkwardly crab walking out of the room because you can't put your knife away, but so long as they don't look behind you, you should be able to hide it. And they really did a great job as well of having these incredible levels. That actually, Blood Money, I can't believe some of the levels they got to run on the PS2. There's a level, I think, I'm going to embarrass myself. It's somewhere, you know, in America where they have like Mardi Gras and stuff. It's spring break or something is going on. And you have to kill these 2 targets that are moving around this hugely crowded like city centre. And you have to kill them both simultaneously, basically, because they're constantly talking, and as soon as one of them dies, the other one will go into like rage mode and just attack you as soon as you get nearby. So it's very hard to like kill one of them without immediately killing the other one following. You know, it's an incredible level. That's also Blood Money where that opera level I mentioned was. And Absolution, I would like to play Hitman Absolution properly, but frankly, until I'm bored of these new ones, I don't feel any compulsion to. Absolution, I think, was kind of a weird mixed bag, and I can only speak from its reputation, but it was kind of the black sheep of the franchise. At least the older Hitman games, at least they were like old and clunky, you know, you can forgive that for its time. But when we've had Blood Money, which was just incredible, and then you had Absolution, which kind of annoyed a lot of people, I think they tried to make it more of a linear experience, which was never the appeal of Hitman. The appeal of Hitman... Thief did this to an extent for another stealth game that's slightly similar, but the appeal of Hitman for me has always been, oh, it's a huge level, where do I go? And then over the course of an hour or two, you'll just figure out the best routes to the targets. And there's so many different... And I think it's because these new games, they're very similar to Blood Money in a lot of ways, but even just the scale of the levels is just so incredible. I guess when you remember that Blood Money had to run on a PlayStation 2, it's not surprising that 10 years later the games can be a lot bigger and more complicated. The first level that really took my breath away in the new oh god damn it, I was playing Hitman 2, the new Hitman 2, I'm so sorry. And there's a level on a racetrack. You have to kill a race driver who is actually in a car at the beginning of the, right as she's racing around. and you have to kill her dad, who's like a billionaire, like war profiteer, basically. None of the people you ever kill in Hitman are ever nice people. You can kill random passers-by if you want, but none of the mandatory deaths are ever for nice people. And you can actually apparently kill the daughter while she's in the car, but I haven't worked out how. So I came up with a way to kill her after she came off the track. And you can also get the dad's like prototype car to blow up in his face, basically. I'm describing these things in quite vague details, because so much of the fun of these games is figuring out what you can do, and it just creates those incredible moments where like I'll tell you something about the tutorial level actually. Even the tutorial level, I've played it through about 10 times. Maybe that's an exaggeration, 5 or 10 times. Because it's just so much fun to, like, you go through once, you're like, oh, okay, I know the controls now, and then you can go again. And once you know that level well enough, I actually beat it in 3 minutes. I got a Silent Assassin, you know? Because it is actually a very small level, as you'd expect for a tutorial. But there's still a lot of fun you can have. I worked out, I was sat there and I was like, you know, oh, my target, he's having a meeting with this guy, and previously I just snuck up on them during the meeting and strangled my target, but I thought, can I get the guy that he's meeting, knock him out, and impersonate him? And you can do that. The game, in you know, it's just like there's 5 or 6 different reliable ways. You know, not counting every single weapon. Obviously, there's like different kinds of guns and different kinds of knives and all that. There's several distinct methods of distracting and killing your targets, and it's incredibly it's so cool how they seem to have thought of everything. A lot of the time there's been very few gripes. I have very few gripes. One thing, this is getting too much into it, but I like the highest level of difficulty in the new Hitmans is called Master, and it is considerably harder, like there's more cameras and stuff. And one thing I like is if you kill someone on the Master difficulty with like a gun or a knife or something that creates like blood, basically, you can't use their disguise effectively anymore because, funnily enough, it's covered in blood. That only happens on the Master difficulty, so it's not usually a concern. But that in itself massively discourages you from using guns, which I like, because guns are OP as all hell. It's just like Metal Gear, actually. For some reason, these games have a bit of an issue where guns are just preposterously powerful. Not as so much, I'd say, in Hitman, because the need to stay quiet and not alert people makes using guns by default a bit tricky sometimes. But and the other thing is, in Hitman, you might have to go through like a metal detector or something. Like you can get frisked sometimes, and they'll find a gun, obviously, and alert everyone. So at least in Hitman, just sometimes getting to your target isn't that much of a trouble, but getting to your target with a weapon is considerable trouble. But one thing I wish is NPCs never react to blood, except on that one specific. If you're on the Master difficulty, they'll react to blood on your disguise, but you can't. If there's a big blood stain on the floor, they won't react to it. You know, bodies of any sort they'll react to, but if there's a massive blood stain on the floor, they have no acknowledgement at all. That is a nitpick, and I would say to keep that on the Master difficulty only. Certainly only the harder difficulties, but that is one nitpick, I'd say. I want to backpedal my comments a little bit about guns. This is one of my big topics for Hitman, but if you've never played Hitman, if you're listening to this, in the unlikely event that you're listening to this, very unlikely, and you're like, I've never played Hitman, but you've really sold me on the idea, I'm going to try the new Hitman games. First of all, yes, try the new Hitman games, Hitman 1 or 2. I'd recommend. They're very similar. I found Hitman 2, I think the earlier levels are a bit friendlier, I'd say. If you have to pick one, I'd say Hitman 2. The new Hitman 2 gets so confusing. Because they are a bit easy to get into. Either one of the two new games, really. And here's my other piece of advice. Do not be afraid to use guns for your first playthrough. Please don't. Surprisingly, the games actually just give you a silenced pistol. I'm fairly sure, like straight from the beginning, which is something the old games didn't used to do. and you're not forced to use it. But if you've never played one of these games before, or even a stealth game before, then definitely do not feel any shame. Set it to easy mode if you want, use guns if you want. You can still have a really great time. Because, you have a gun, you can kill your target any time, you just need a line of sight. But getting that line of sight and shooting them without everyone seeing can still be quite tricky. I will quickly interject my own point here. There was an amazing mission in Hitman Contracts where, two targets are meeting in a Chinese restaurant, and you can either agonizingly go in there and impersonate the waiters and do all these things to kill, because obviously there's two targets and they're meeting, so it's difficult to kill one without the other one noticing. And what I worked out you could do, if you unlock the sniper rifle in a briefcase, you can go to the building across the road, set up your sniper rifle, which is a long, laborious, 10-second process of getting the sniper rifle out. With one bullet, you can actually kill both of them through the window using your rifle. And then, of course, when everyone's like, what happened? You can just quietly put your briefcase away and walk down the road. You can beat that mission in 2 minutes if you know what you're doing. So even though, figuring that out was an amazing experience, I was like, it'd be really cool if I could just shoot them through the window. And then I very quickly thought, well, I can't shoot both of them. What if I could find an angle where I could hit them both through the head in one go? And I wasn't sure if that would work, and then it did. And that's what Hitman is all about, is those moments of oh, if only I could do something like this. Oh, well, I suppose I'll try it, and then it works. And I love that, everyone's panicking, and you're just smugly, even if you get seen, you can run away, change your disguise. And then, of course, if you're dressed as a chef, and they're chasing after the chef, you can change your outfit back to your regular suit or some other disguise, and they're not looking for you anymore, are they? They're still on high alert, so you shouldn't act suspiciously, don't run around. But they're looking for the chef. So that is one of the best feelings, is just walking away and they're looking for the wrong guy. So I did interrupt my own point. I'm impressed I remembered. But yeah, don't be ashamed about using guns, especially on your first playthrough. If you've never played a game like this, absolutely go wild. Use the help, use the guide. Here's the thing, like me, I used to be crap at these games, but now I'm trying to go through and do them on Silent Assassin rating, which is super hard on some of them. For me personally, having played most of these games before, I really enjoy not using guns. And also not save scumming. Save scumming is such a judgmental term. That's if you're playing Oblivion or something, and you walk around a corner and die in a trap, well, you can just reload, and that didn't happen, did you? But actually, that's not even a good example because you don't really have any choice. Okay, in Hitman, save scumming is if you walk around a corner and your disguise is blown, you're like, oh, well, I saved 2 minutes ago, I'll just reload that save. For me personally, it's often not too difficult to get away from the guards if you do get seen. So I like the running away. If you're walking around as a chef, and then you do something suspicious and your cover is blown, having to run away and hide, and then get a new disguise, and not being able to use the chef disguises reliably for a while is actually really interesting. You're like, oh bugger, they've seen my disguise, they've got to, it forces you to reevaluate your plan on the fly and come up with some new solution. It happened to me in one of the levels, just keeping it very vague. I'd killed my target, but then someone walked in on me, stabbing her, basically, and I was like, oh no! So I'd completed part of the mission, but in the process got rumbled, so I had to run away, and I did something very silly in that same level, actually. I changed my disguise. I was dressed as a guard, and I changed my disguise back to my civilian outfit, but I forgot to get rid of the gun on my back. So, of course, I walked in the room with a big gun, and it looked a bit weird because I wasn't dressed as a guard at the time, so that didn't help my disguise problem. It does remind me of Metal Gear in that way. I used to... One of my fun Metal Gear facts is one of my favourite games of all time these days is Metal Gear Solid 3. But I really didn't get on with that game the first time, and I kind of had to work at it and get into it. And I think Hitman, at least in the old games, was that kind of thing where, you know, don't be afraid to use the easy modes and stuff, because if you're anything like me, you'll then go, yay, I did it, I overcame this challenge, but I bet I could do it better. I had a lot of fun actually. I stuck to just the footage on YouTube, just footage of no commentary, just me playing the game. I love getting Silent Assassin and then going like, okay, well I know how to do it now. Can I shave 10 minutes off that waiting time? And one thing about Hitman is you do sometimes just spend a lot of the time waiting around. I had to spend about 3 minutes essentially because I knew where my target was going to be and how to kill him, but he was just taking 3 minutes to get to me. And if you're trying to shave time off your run, that's when you're like, well, there must be a quicker way to kill him then, because they wouldn't design a level where you have no choice but to sit around for 3 minutes. You know, the speedrunners would not accept that. The speedrunners union would get together and personally burn down the IO Interactive building, probably. There are ridiculous, preposterous videos on the internet of people beating Hitman levels in literally 30 seconds and that sort of thing, and getting Silent Assassin as well. Partly because you can always use guns. You can still get Silent Assassin rating with using guns, by the way. It's not weapon dependent. I do find, though, and I did mention before, I just think not using guns... If you've got the silenced pistol, for instance, I want to make it clear that I'm not judging anyone who uses guns. It's just because I've reached the point where using guns isn't exciting to me anymore, so I just deliberately... Once you reach a certain skill threshold, now I sound like I'm boasting. It's the difference between walking into a room and just shooting them versus, oh, okay, right, well, I've got them in the room, but I need to wait until I can use this fiber wire, which is my only lethal weapon or something. You know, I mentioned before there was that moment where I was like, oh crap, this statue will do. It creates those fun moments where you had to panic and throw something at someone. I always scoop up any random items. There's loads of random like cans of Coke and stuff in levels, and there doesn't seem to be an inventory limit, so I will just grab any item. Some of them are lethal, like, you know, scissors. You know, it's hard to attack someone non-lethally with scissors, just kind of nudge them with it, I suppose. I like the letter opener. You can stab people with a letter opener. It's pretty brutal. You can also hit people with paddles. It's like a boat paddle that you can just beat people with, which I enjoy. And a katana. Naturally, there's a katana. I used to have fun in Hitman contracts deliberately trying to sneak around with weapons. Because some weapons can be concealed, like a pistol, you can put it in your pocket. But if it's a rifle, you can only put it on your back or drop it, basically. I used to have fun in contracts deliberately trying to sneak around with weapons that you couldn't conceal properly. There are cool, if you don't use guns, you can still use mines. Now, the new games have like a sort of progression system where you unlock things by getting more and more XP from getting better at missions. The proximity mine is a bit worthless because as soon as you put it down, you have like 2 seconds to get away from it, and then whoever walks up to it will just set it off. So once you've placed it, it doesn't seem to be possible to pick it up again, which is a fairly major design flaw. It's like that guy in The Simpsons who died in World War II because he held onto a grenade too long. Epic. The remote mine is extremely good though, especially if people see it in and of itself, they'll be like, what's that? But you can put it in a briefcase and carry it around, and I think that'll get you through metal detectors and stuff. It's really cool. You can put it down and then obviously remote detonate it whenever you want, and there's a few remote items like that. One thing I worked out in one level is if you know where the character is going to spawn at a certain event in the level, you can just put a proximity mine there and she'll walk right into it and blow up, but of course in the process alert everyone. I think that's more balanced than the guns though, because it involves actually getting up to where your target is going to be, putting something there, and then paying enough attention that you can set it off at the right moment, as opposed to like walking in, shooting them in the face with your silenced pistol. I think the silenced pistol does make a bit of noise, but it's very, like, if they have to be stood next to you to hear it, I think that's how it works. To be honest, I've used guns so little in this new game that I don't really have an understanding of them. I will wrap up. I'll just quickly mention another fun challenge I used to do is, and it's kind of not feasible anymore because of so many of these newer levels have huge crowds of people, but something I liked to do was kind of the opposite of the silent assassin, the noisy assassin. No, deliberately trying to kill everyone in the map. Usually, and this is, I think, one of the key aspects of a good stealth game actually in general is there are times in Hitman where it's really not worth trying to knock someone out, or, you know, just like maybe a guard keeps coming in and out of the room and you're like, oh, I wish I could just knock him out, but then you're like, that's a tactical decision, especially if you're trying to do it without quick saving all the time. You know, you might be able to knock him out and stuff him in a cupboard, but then someone might see you in the process, or maybe you, like, if you don't knock them out right behind them, they can often turn around and then it's much noisier to knock them out, you know. So even though the mechanics are much more streamlined and simple than they used to be, there are still little finesses. Like, I didn't realise at first that if you don't kind of subdue someone right behind in the right angle, they'll start to turn around and then it turns into more of a fist fight of you like punching them in the face and it'll make noise and they shout, you know. I'm definitely losing the plot. I definitely wrap this up. I just desperately felt the need to ramble about Hitman, and it occurred to me I hadn't put anything on this channel in about 2,000 years, so here putteth I my mine Hitman opinions. Boom. Recommended. I'm still in that honeymoon period with these new Hitman games, so I probably shouldn't say anything too hyperbolic, because a month from now I might be completely... I also haven't beaten them, so I don't know if the plot suddenly gets amazing or terrible or whatever. There hasn't been a bad level yet, I'll say, and I have very few meaningful criticisms. There's only little things like one point that is definitely a nitpick, but the 47 can just knock people out, and you can also snap their necks after they've been knocked out. He can do all of that with just his bare hands, and that's all silent. So long as you sneak up on someone properly, he can just knock them out and then kill them completely silently with his bare hands. Now obviously that's melee, he can't shoot them. By default you need a gun to do that. But it kind of trivializes the need to have melee weapons, and in particular the fiber wire, which is still one of the better melee weapons, is the iconic fiber wire, like he strangles them. It's still one of the better melee weapons because it won't set off metal detectors, and you can also drag them away. As soon as they're dead, you can start dragging them, and those precious couple of seconds, it can be the difference between getting spotted and getting away with it. But in the old games, the fiber wire was like completely indispensable, whereas now, you know, your inventory slots are very limited when you're doing your mission planning at the beginning. And honestly, I've not been using the fiber wire hardly ever, because if you can get that close to your target, you can just snap their neck pretty quickly anyway, so it's a pretty redundant tool, honestly. Something I almost forgot. One of the coolest ways to kill your targets is you can set up their death to make it look like an accident. Like you can drop a chandelier on them, is quite a common one. You can push them over ledges. Ever since Blood Money, you can quite dynamically push people over ledges or pick up their body and hurl it over a ledge. So if you knocked someone out, you can then just flop them over a windowsill and it looks like an accident, which I think just gives you bonus points, but it's just a really cool, like, almost like roleplay thing, like, oh yeah, you know, not only did I kill them and no one saw me, but also it looked like an accident, you know. That's just like the ultimate. There's Silent Assassin, and then there's kind of like an unofficial, oh, and also it looked like an accident, so no one even suspects that there was a murderer. That's like the unofficial, even harder rank, if you can make everyone... I have looked in the stats of the game sometimes. It does seem a bit arbitrary what's defined as an accident. Like, I might be wrong, but I think dying of poison somehow counts as an accident. I might be completely wrong, but I just look at the stats and I'm like, it says killed with accident. I'm like, who was that? And I realized, did I poison them? Did that count as an accident? I guess it must have. I couldn't think what else it was. But you can like drop a life raft on one guy and that sort of thing. it's just an endlessly entertaining game. I'm only slightly beginning to burn out on it. But I am in a honeymoon period. But I will say this is probably the most fun I've had with a stealth game since Metal Gear 5, and I will talk your ear off in a whole other video probably one day about how Metal Gear 5 has a host of problems, primarily to do with the story, but it's still an absolutely incredible, like, open world Metal Gear. Like, just from a purely gameplay perspective, it's still one of the best stealth games ever. And these new Hitman games, that was the last time I felt this much fun in a stealth game, was running around as Big Boss. I mean, and as I nearly said the Metal Gear has an advantage because of nostalgia, but Hitman has this. I'm nostalgic for Hitman as well. I think it's just that Big Boss specifically is an amazing character who I felt a particular nostalgia for. Even though technically spoiler. So yeah. In summary, it is good. Hitman is good. Good work, 47. You did it. I like how one of the missions has you, and it's just a throwaway line, but one of the missions says that the contract was you've been hired to do this job to kill someone by MI6, which I'm pretty sure is the fictional UK government division that James Bond works for. I don't think MI6 is a real thing. I think it's just MI5 is the real one. And I like how that's just a throwaway detail that the UK government is paying you to kill these people. Kind of interesting moral greyness to this whole thing. Like, the UK government doing something shifty? Whoa, how unprecedented. Is my sarcasm subtle enough? I'm definitely tangenting now. Look, go play Hitman if you want a good, solid, good Hitman time. The music's really good, even though, and this will haunt me forever, Jesper Kyd used to be the guy who did all the Hitman music. He was famous for it. I think he was in Borderlands, and he did this incredible, like, operatic and electronic and really moody music. Hitman Contracts is one of the best, like, menus ever in a game, because it's just Agent 47 sat on a chair with a sniper rifle in like a dark room with a thunderstorm going on outside, and the music starts out like dung 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 dung, and after a minute it turns into this like operatic, like oh do 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 do, and I'm like, why is it so epic? He's just sat in front of a window, you know. It's over the top. Jesper Kyd does not do the music in the new games, and I confess I've forgotten the name of the people who do it now, but they do a really good job. I think there's a I think whenever you kill your target, there's a particular music swell that kicks in, and I think when you're about to leave a mission, the music seems to pick up, like dun dun dun. When it's like, I had a moment earlier today actually where I was heading for the level exit, and I was really worried that someone might spot. Like, I think that I was worried that someone might spot my handiwork and the alert would go up just before I left the mission and got a silent assassin, but it didn't happen. But so I was walking towards the exit, and like 10 seconds before the end of the level, the music started going dun 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 dun. It was just really good. It is a good video game. That's my conclusion. Hitman, good video games. 11 out of 10 probably. You know, I'd say 12 silver baller pistols out of 10.
Think again.
Oh, actually, I thought of something. I just want to quickly say, I think it's a miracle that we got these games, because Absolution quite famously undersold because it was weird and no one liked it basically, and then this new Hitman trilogy started with the confusingly named Hitman in 2016 I think, and that didn't sell super well because of their weird business model. Despite the fact that the game was great and everyone liked it, the weird business model put a lot of people off and it wasn't marketed very well. So I was genuinely worried that that might be the end of the franchise, and I think it was published by Square Enix, I'm pretty sure, but they sold it, and God help them, Warner Brothers bought the company, I think. Did they buy the company or did they buy the rights to it? There was something. Something's happened, and now Warner Brothers is involved. I think the original developer had to scale down or something, but miraculously, the heavens aligned and we got our Hitman sequel after the first one was so good. It would have been the worst thing in the world if we had a really good Hitman game and then it stopped. But we got another one, and I think the second one must have sold significantly better. I think word of mouth. Actually, I think I saw a story that said the exact opposite of that, but the difference is word of mouth got around. These games were really good, and I think Hitman 2 changed the business model a bit so it's less awful. And now Hitman 3 we're going to get at least one more Hitman game, which isn't something I can say for Metal Gear. Ever since Metal Gear 5 and Kojima left, at the risk of a Metal Gear tangent, people big up Kojima, and he deserves all the credit in the world for being a director and a writer sometimes. But he is also very weird, and it's the concept that there's no such thing in video games, especially where there's hundreds of people who work on big games. There's no such thing as this is my game. The director is an important job, and a lot of their particular direction can go into it. Direction from the director, funnily enough. A Kojima game will often be quite distinct in tone. This is definitely a tangent, and you kind of see what I'm getting at. But my point was, at least we're getting these new Hitman games, and they're pretty much exactly what people want. Whereas Metal Gear, now that Kojima's left, and it's just Konami, who are the worst big game publisher now. They just make pachinko machines primarily. At least Hitman is still coming out, and that's more than I can say for Metal Gear and Dead Space and all these just forgotten franchises practically. Okay, so to sum up, Hitman good, bye. And another thing, no, that is genuinely probably it. Goodbye.